This podcast may contain explicit language. Love is the morning and the evening star. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
And tonight, for our 268th episode, we confront our own demons with Elmer Gantry, celebrating its 65th anniversary. Written and directed by Richard Brooks, cinematography by John Alton, music by Andre Previn, starring Burt Lancaster as Elmer Gantry, Gene Simmons as Sister Sharon Falconer, Arthur Kennedy as Jim Lefferts, Dean Yeager, or Jaeger, as William L. Morgan. It might be a soft J, like yogging. Shirley Jones as Lulu Baines, Patty Page as Sister Rachel, Edward Andrews as George F. Babbitt, John McIntyre as Reverend John Pengilly, Hugh Marlowe as Reverend Philip Garrison. And in tonight, to help us discuss this film, we welcome our two newest celebrity guests, a husband and wife team from Shoot the Flick, the podcast, making their first appearances on the show to date. It's Frankie and Scott!
Hi,
Woo!
everybody. Here we are.
Excited to be here.
Indeed. This was an interesting movie to start.
Certainly with my co-host sometimes dead fish approach, I certainly need some extra energy in this space tonight.
Carp, bass, tuna,
Halibut.
Miss
mackerel.
Are we just naming fish now?
Salmon.
Yes,
No.
it's a callback joke to a television show that I don't know if everybody's seen called How I Met Your Mother, where one of the main characters does a set at an open mic night where all he does is just spout off fish names because he thinks they're funny. And it's the dumbest thing. Anyway, if you haven't seen it, don't worry. He's, of course, doing a joke that for most people that are listening to this probably have not seen it. But for the few of you that are, there you
You're
go.
welcome.
So,
With the dead fish line.
Elmer Gantry. This is an unusual pick. As I was mentioning before we went live here tonight, it is something that my father confessed. He specifically had me put it on the list so that he could watch it, much in the same way that I've done with several other movies this year. American Psycho, Ex Machina were on my list of things that I needed to watch for a first time. So this is one for you, Dad. What is your relationship with this movie?
I don't have one. This is what I remember I remember being in grade school and coming across the book, Elmer Gantry. And I read the jacket and I thought it was interesting. I remember talking to my dad about it and he said, there is a movie. And I said, really? He says, yeah, it's a really good movie with Burt Lancaster. Okay, well, that kind of triggered my appetite for it. And I have never seen it on TMC. I've never seen it on anything at all to try to watch it over all these years. And I've just always had it in the back of my mind that I wanted to watch this film. It intrigued me and I'd never gotten around to it.
So what approximately grade were you in when you came across this in the school library?
Fourth
grade. Okay. So that would have roughly made you 9 years old. So
Yes.
that would have been 1972.
Yes.
So you've been
73.
holding on to this for 53 years.
Yes.
Okay.
And we didn't
I have to
listen the
admit,
beginning.
this is my first watch with this as well.
Same.
Am I the only one that's seen this before?
Apparently.
That's bizarre. The only reason, just to put it out there, the only reason I even knew of this movie, I think I had watched From Here to Eternity and Sweet Smell of Success, both Burt Lancaster films, pretty close in succession. And I just was curious about Burt Lancaster's filmography. So I went looking around and I noticed that this was the movie Elmer Gantry that won him his Oscar. So I just went digging for it and I found it on Tubi or some other streaming service. And I watched it because of that. Before that, though, had never heard of this thing ever in life. So do with that what you will.
Sweet Smell of Success is a very underrated film.
I think so, too.
Also one I haven't seen yet. But I would assume with your predilection for it, Father, that we'll probably get to that at some point.
Yep.
Okay.
Tony Curtis, Burt Lancaster.
Yes, oddly enough, this is the movie that basically ruins a trivia question for most people. If you ask them, what did Jack Lemmon win Best Actor for? Most people are going to say The Apartment, and that is not so, thanks to this movie.
Which I didn't
In fact-
realize until I read it on IMDb. Like, it didn't occur to me that
Didn't he win his
those
first
movies were
for
the same year.
The Days of Wines and Roses?
I think he only won one Best Actor award, and I believe that is the right one. He won a Best Supporting Actor for a movie we've already covered.
Yes. Mr. Roberts. Playing Ensign Pulver.
Oh, excuse me. The Days of Wine and Roses, he was nominated, but he did not
Yes.
win.
Yeah, it was another film in Save the Tiger.
Yes, from 1973.
Yep.
So, a little bit of quick Googling there. All right. But this movie starts off with a title card urging impressionable children to not watch. For my first time through, I thought, oh boy, this is an interesting start for a 1960 movie that's 2.5 hours long. So why do you think that's there?
Oh, dear.
Well, I think it's mainly because religion is always kind of a hot button topic to discuss whenever. Things are like the questioning of religion it's just one of those hot button topics like, oh, we touch on it and then we kind of run away from it in most movies. This does not really run away from it.
No.
So, according to like people who like talk about the book, it does pull its punches.
I think specifically it pulled its punches because it was still just short of being outside the Hays Code. And specifically, I don't know if it's satirizing, but definitely commentary on white Protestants was
Mhm.
not going to be received well.
Yeah.
Well, just remember that in the 1950s and 60s, it was difficult for all films to get wide play in the Deep South. And there's a reason why it's called the Bible Belt. And this would not play well in certain theaters in Biloxi or Birmingham or Atlanta because of the religious aspect of it.
I would assume so. So I will pose what is normally a pretty usual question for us. What is the movie about? Is it more about false prophets or false religion?
I think it's funny because I was thinking a lot about that particular question that you posed before, like when I was going through notes and stuff. And originally I was going to say both. But then for some reason I decided to rewatch the movie this morning. Don't ask me why. I just did. I think it really is more about false prophets more than false religion. Only because they make a point with the Jim Lefferts character to say that like religion isn't necessarily something that is inherently bad. Like, you know, there's a difference between looking at the Bible, let's say, and thinking that it's literal and everything in that book you should go by the letter of what it says, or just take it as poetry and stories that you can take lessons from. So it's all about the people that take the word and twist it to their own means.
I think I would probably come down in a similar vein. Much of my criticism of modern, let's say, religiosity has boiled down to it more or less coming in contact with humans, the organized part of organized religion, I think that unfortunately too many religious people co-opt their message and try and engineer it to their own means. And obviously that's been a product of history for as long as time immemorial. But I think that it's driven a lot of people away where we're not in a place where we need that level of a social infrastructure as we once did to rely on religion as being the grounding force for principles and morals in a modern society. And so as community and institutions have begun to break down in the last, I would say probably 15, 20 years, the need for it to be the backbone or the center of what has become everybody's moral code has taken less and less importance. At the time yet, I would still say that, go ahead, Dad.
No,
He's
go ahead.
You rolled your eyes. Go ahead.
You're just going in. Finish your thought.
I already jettisoned, so
Okay, I'm not sure it's how you put it. False prophet, false religion. I think it's more about the people following than it is the individuals or the prophets themselves. I think it's the cult of personality. And I think that it's the fact that they can turn on a dime. Oh, we love you. We love you. What? You were involved with a prostitute. Oh, you demon. We hate you. We're going to destroy you. Blah. Oh, she said you didn't do it. Oh, okay. We love you again. Please come back. Sounds like a particular inhabitant of a white building on Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. right now. Yeah.
Yes, our weekly allude to the resistance.
Anyway, so that's my thought process on this, which is that it more talks about us as the sheep than them as the shepherd.
Which goes right back to that title card at the beginning. That makes sense, I guess.
I'm not sure I would go quite that far that it removes all ownership by Gantry and Shara, etc. They still have a role to play, but they are, I think, alluding to the end when Jefford said they don't want their gods to be human.
Well, and being the oldest person in this broadcast.
How dare you out
recording.
yourself?
I feel like you say that once every episode. As the oldest person in this room, let me just say.
I lived through the Jimmy Swaggart, the Jim and Tammy Faye Baker, the Jerry Falwell period, Oral Robertson saying that if I don't raise $5 million, the Lord's going to take me home and I'm going to sit in my prayer tower. I mean, I lived through this and saw how manipulated people were and how jaded people became because of the sexual improprieties of individuals within this, swearing to be upholding and godly, and then turning around and you have people like Pat Robertson who said 9/11 was judgment on America for gay rights. You can try to make it as jaded and say that, no, they aren't my religion. They're their own group. But ultimately, I think it's kind of become integrated. I think we've lost sight a lot of times of what it is. Let me just, I'm very pleased by the fresh look of the new Pope, the American Pope, because he comes from
Our
a very
Chicagoan Pope. We love that.
Serbian background, spent years in Peru, I believe.
Yes.
Working with indigent people and the poor and feeding children and taking care of the sick. And I'm hopeful that somehow or another, this is going to kind of bring everything back to where it should be. But anyway.
The Pope serves very little purpose in a modern sense. I don't even know how much influence he has over Catholics, whose numbers are dwindling. So you're also not Catholic. So what difference does the Pope make here?
I don't know. It gives me hope.
Hope from the Pope. Okay.
Which is better than soap or the Pope on a or soap on a or was it soap on
Pope
a rope?
On soap.
Soap on a rope?
Was it Pope on a rope? With
Pope on soap on a rope.
Guido Sarducci.
The Pope on soap on a rope.
There we go.
Yes.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I'm not selling you. That's the Pope on the rope. We're selling all the Vatican stuff for the Pope's visit to America.
And maybe some of the hope from inside the soap from the Pope on a rope might rub off.
Yes.
And now that we're in a Dr. Seuss rhyme.
Yeah, I was just going to say, all the places will go.
No, I have to agree with Dana a little bit here because I was actually surprised how kind of relevant this movie seems.
I was just going to say that.
Like,
there is a timelessness to it because it's still very much a thing today. People taking advantage of religion and religious people. It's
just an interesting thing watching it because, like Frankie before she saw it, I have never heard of this movie. And true, my Burt Lancaster isn't strong.
Field of Dreams, and that's
Field
it.
of Dreams, and that's it. But it just seems like this movie connects with a lot of things currently going on in the world, and it's just a weird thing to be like, wow, it's been 60 plus years and we're still,
that's what he said, 65 years.
65 years and we're still dealing with some of the same nonsense.
I was surprised how much I enjoyed the film after probably the initial 20 minutes that it kind of takes as a preamble to get you into it. Once you kind of get on, I guess, the first scene where he sees Sister Sharon, and then especially by the time you get to the train, I think the movie kind of takes off. And from that point on, I very much enjoyed the movie. I did also find it to be somewhat relevant and prescient, so much so that I volunteered myself for the year 1960 for Revisionist Almanac in 2030.
Look at you go.
There you go.
Wow.
So we could do the 70th anniversary.
He is that far ahead?
Well, only when it comes to me. Yes.
Okay.
Originally, he said he was going to do it in 2029 because that's the next slots that he has available that he hasn't planned. But I told him to push it back to 2030.
There you go.
But then again, he's also told me that I need to be on every single season for some reason. Whatever.
We're still gearing up for our first visit, so we're a
I'm
little
hoping
behind.
to be retired by 30-30.
30-30? Yes, I think you would be very retired by 30-30.
We'll all be retired.
What do you think? There will be no retirement at that point. We'll all still be working.
We'll all be working till 106.
So you're like Tom Cruise?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my god. I'm never going to stop, ever. I'll be making Mission Impossible movies when I'm 92. Okay, sweetie.
To be fair, it is quite possible. I do believe him that he will be making movies after I'm dead.
Tom Cruise is going to outlive all of us.
It's going to be like the Futurama. He's going to be the head in the jar starring in a movie.
What? Doesn't he have a weird religion? What's his thing again?
Scientology.
He's
Scientology magic. He's going to outlive all of us.
Yeah. Okay, let's get off the Tom Cruise for a minute.
Please.
Here because
I don't know how we got here.
that's going to only take us down some weird rabbit holes. Dad, for having waited 53 years, did you like the film?
No, I did not like the film. I loved it.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that is just creepy.
What a twist. This guy.
You don't have
No,
to say it like it's orgasmic.
Well, okay.
Didn't think you'd hear that term tonight, did you?
No, not for this.
Is that on your bingo card?
This is a place for the Lord. Why are we talking about orgasm?
Please, like people haven't had sex in church before.
Well, she did comment that.
I mean,
was
we just got
behind the
done
pulpit
talking about Catholics.
and Elmer Gantry put God into her.
That is very true.
Hey, and there's no weird sting into it, so we need weird sting music for that to happen.
Oh my god! At some point, we got to have a conversation about the score, but we'll get there.
Okay, so we already kind of mentioned it before, but Burt Lancaster famously wins his only Best Actor award for this movie over Jack Lemmon for The Apartment, Laurence Olivier for The Entertainer, Spencer Tracy for Inherit the Wind, Anthony Perkins for Psycho, and Kirk Douglas for Spartacus. Was it a proper win?
It's a good performance, but when nomination, yes. I can't give him over Anthony Perkins. Personally, I love Psycho.
Anthony Perkins was never going to win for Psycho in 1960.
I understand.
Andrew, are you listening? We need this immediately.
There's the win at the time, and then there's the win in revision.
That's just, yes.
I think we went through this last year when we were talking about the year 1994, because it was the 30th anniversary. And we did all three of the major Best Picture nominees from that year: Forrest Gump, Shawshank Redemption, Pulp Fiction. I think in the moment, Forrest Gump was the one that should have won because of what the Oscars were at that time. In hindsight, most people wanted Pulp to win. And realistically, Shawshank is probably the best of the three movies. So, I mean...
I've never seen it.
I love Jack Lemmon, okay, and I love The Apartment. But Jack Lemmon, okay, he did a really good job and he deserved the nomination. I have not seen Olivier in The Entertainer, so I can't comment about it. Seeing Tracy in Inherit the Wind is always iconic to me. It's one of the performances I'll always remember. Anthony Perkins in Psycho, great. Kirk Douglas in Spartacus, great. But if Burt Lancaster does not play this part, this film does not work, because he had to be so overly charming and be so bigger than life throughout the entire film. He had to constantly go that extra step beyond what is normally required of an actor. That it, to me, I think this is one of the iconic roles of all time. In fact, I would rank it in probably in one of the top 10 best actor performances in cinema.
See, I disagree. I think if you take Burt Lancaster out of this role, you could replace him with a Kirk Douglas. You might be able to replace him with basically anybody with an award-winning smile and a certain level of screen presence. Whereas I don't know if Jack Lemmon can be replaced from The Apartment. He is the most neurotic non-Jew that I can think of.
That should be on his tombstone.
It probably is.
So I haven't seen all these movies either, but I've seen The Apartment and I've seen Inherit the Wind and I've seen Psycho. What I'll say about those movies in comparison to this, even though, like, yes, there are secondary leads in this movie, like with Gene Simmons and Shirley Jones, I think it very much is the Burt Lancaster show, for better or worse. And I think he gives a great performance. I think, if anything, it could be considered an Oscar baity performance just purely for that fact. Because, I mean, in Psycho, him and Janet Leigh are pretty much co-leads, right? Yeah. Same thing with, like, Inherit the Wind. I don't remember the other actor's name. With Spencer
Pat
Tracy.
O'Brien.
Yes, and then what was the other one? My brain. All right, The Apartment with Shirley MacLaine. So yeah, I mean, when you watch Elmer Gantry, you definitely feel like he's really going for it, sweetie. He's really trying to get that statue. And, like, if I was in the shoes of an audience member watching the Oscars at that time, I don't think I would have been mad that he won. Like, I think it's well deserved. But the problem is, yeah, there are definitely other very strong contenders in there. But I think I would have been perfectly happy with the win if I had seen it.
Like, I'm not disappointed that he won, but based on your criteria of you remove one from one film and one from the other, what seemingly or above replacement, which one feels completely or vastly different? I think The Apartment feels very different if it's not Jack Lemmon. And this one, I could very much envision even Paul Newman
I was just going to say Paul Newman because he did 2 Paul Newman movies like in between this movie. And I was trying to think, could Paul Newman do this? Yeah, probably.
Well, because he does do it in The Sting.
Yeah, that's true.
It's basically the same type of character.
Can anybody be Anthony Perkins in Psycho? That's the real question.
Obvious, but I mean...
Is Anthony Psycho, though, a best actor? That's the thing.
He had to play this rather mealy mouth, passive character, and he really doesn't have to do anything other than that.
I disagree with that. By the end, that final scene in there, I think he's doing an all-time performance that in that moment. But I think the only way he wins Best Actor is if we have the same criteria as they did for Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah. That was a really hard barrier to break for Hopkins. So
Hollywood had too much trouble with Hitchcock anyway because they perceived him as being not an artist because he did television to earn a few extra bucks.
And yet he was nominated for director.
Yeah, and he never won. And it wasn't until afterwards that people started giving him his real kudos until he wins his first film and then doesn't win again.
Stanley Kubrick never won Best Director.
Yeah.
Wins don't necessarily mean everything.
That's
John
true.
Ford has 4, and 3 of them are for movies, or at least 2 of them are for movies that, well, okay, I'm already backtracking, but 1 I haven't seen. But The Quiet Man, the win for Quiet Man should not have happened. I'm on record saying that, going back to an episode from like 3 years ago. So anyway, shall we dig further into our episode this evening? Let's give a little bit more background for Elmer Gantry here. It was released on June 29th, 1960. On a budget of $3 million, it would roughly gross $5.2 million to be the number 8 film of 1960. And for what it's worth, anything before about 1970 and its placement in the domestic versus worldwide box office can be taken with a grain of salt because the numbers were not great at that time as to figuring out exactly what did what. But the film also was well received by critics at the time and would go on to be nominated for 5 Oscars: Best Picture, Original Score, winning for Best Actor for Burt Lancaster, Supporting Actress for Shirley Jones, and Adapted Screenplay for Richard Brooks. Currently holds a 94% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes and a 3.8 out of 5 on Letterboxd. Strangely enough, it was not featured on Metacritic, so I could not get a score there.
Interesting.
Certain older films, if they're a little bit more obscure, just they don't have Metacritic ratings for whatever reason. It's happened a couple of times to us. So, Dad, do you have a plot summary ready for us?
I do. Based on a novel by Sinclair Lewis, Elmer Gantry's story follows the titular character Burt Lancaster, a charismatic but morally dubious traveling salesman who uses his charm and persuasive skills to infiltrate the world of evangelical revivalism. He joins forces with Sister Sharon Falconer, Gene Simmons, a passionate preacher, and together they build a thriving religious movement. However, Gantry's past and his self-serving nature threaten to unravel everything, leading to dramatic consequences.
Thank you. Did you know? A highly controversial novel in its day, no studio initially wanted to finance the film. Nevertheless, when he first learned that Richard Brooks was interested in adapting his novel, Sinclair Lewis told him that he should change it significantly, advising him to read all the criticisms of the book and use them as a way to improve on it. To keep word from leaking out as to how the novel would be adapted to the screen, only the film's 6 major stars were given access to the complete screenplay. So, in essence, this is the Marvel movie of its day.
So who would be deemed the 6 primary actors?
I would have to assume Lancaster, Simmons, Arthur Kennedy, because Lefferts is such a big part of the film. Shirley Jones.
The guy who plays Bill. Her, right-hand man.
Yeah, Dean Jager.
And then 6, I don't know. Maybe the weird guy
well,
that's erect all the time.
Well, it's possible it's either Sister Rachel, but more likely to me, it's probably Edward Andrews as Babbitt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Longtime character actor in Hollywood.
Did you know Pat Hingle originally landed the title role in the film, but before filming began, he became caught in a stalled elevator in his apartment building. He lost his balance while trying to crawl out and fell 54 feet down the shaft. He sustained massive injuries, including a fractured skull, wrist, hip, and leg, and several broken ribs. He also lost his little finger on his left hand. Hingle spent much of the next year relearning how to walk and was forced to give up the part in order to recover from his horrific injuries. I'm not familiar with Pat Hingle.
Seems like flashback, like Final Destination.
The name is familiar, and I'm trying to remember. I can't place the face.
Honestly, now that I look him up, he is a longtime character actor, but he's in a lot of Clint Eastwood films. Hang 'em High, The Gauntlet, Splendor in the Grass, Sudden Impact, Invitation to a Gunfighter. He was also in The Land Before Time and Norma Ray. Interesting.
Okay.
Like, if you look at a picture of him, you're like, oh, yeah, that guy. Apparently, he was also in On the Waterfront.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he did a...
Oh, yes.
He did a very classic episode of MASH as a character actor in the mid-70s. Yeah. All right. Now I recognize him for certain.
So this is, oddly enough, it could have been his Marty. Somebody like Ernest Borgnine who steps into the spotlight for one movie and wins their best actor. That's too bad. Did you know? In an effort to appease the Hays Code, a number of changes were made to omit controversial aspects of the book. In the original novel, Gantry was an ordained minister, but since the code was against negative portrayals of priests, this element was entirely omitted.
Yeah, I remember in prep for this, Scott listened to a couple of podcasts that have talked about it, and he was telling me like all the changes they made from the book, and I'm like, this book is pretty scandalous. I want to read it, kind of. It's really kind of messed up. It seems like they kind of softened Elmer a little bit to make it palatable for the 1960 audience, which he's not a great character in the movie. But
I don't remember Sinclair Lewis really ever pulling punches on any of his books.
Yeah.
I think this book was even banned in Boston at one point.
Well, I mean, a heavily Catholic area.
Yeah, that I was just gonna say that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, they certainly didn't want to draw attention to priests early on. Anyway, did you know? Babbitt complains about how there's a Catholic running for U.S. president. Since the story is set in the 1920s, this implies that the candidate is Al Smith, governor of New York, who ran multiple times in the 1920s and became the Democratic nominee in 1928. But for audiences watching this film during its 1960 release, Babbitt's anti-Catholic remark carried extra meaning because John F. Kennedy was running that year and got elected as the first Catholic president. And I believe only Catholic president to date.
No. Joe Biden.
Joe Biden's Catholic?
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
You're right. He is Catholic.
But yeah, I thought that was so weird when they said that. I was like, oh, wait, when is this supposed to be?
Yep. The happy word.
Yeah. I mean,
he fell short of the nomination in 24, won it in 28, and then wanted it again in 32, and FDR circumvented him.
I'll go back to something my grandfather has mentioned on many, many, many occasions. A man who grew up in southwest Minnesota in a very small farm community. And as he has repeatedly told me, they had diversity when he was growing up. They had 4 families who were Catholic.
Jeez.
And he says this with a straight face. So mind you, that's where I come from. Anyway, did you know Burt Lancaster intended the film as an attack on Billy Graham?
Okay.
I suppose he's the most notable person of this type at the time.
Most notable evangelist at the time. And there was a lot of criticism because he tended to wear rather expensive suits and to travel very luxuriously, etc. So yes.
I was just going to say, did he have a jet that his parishioners paid for? Because that's definitely a thing that still happens.
No, it was gifted to him by some random country somewhere. And finally, did you know director Richard Brooks did not want Shirley Jones for the role of Lulu Baines, but Burt Lancaster insisted. As a result, Brooks gave Jones no direction in the filming of a very difficult scene. Brooks eventually admitted to her that he couldn't see anyone else in the role. Shirley Jones's Oscar-winning performance in this film is her only Academy Award nomination.
She didn't do that many films. I mean, other than Music Man, I don't remember anything else she did.
I was going to say, I knew I recognized her from something, and when I looked it up, I was like, oh, Music Man, which is funny because at least in the beginning, this movie kind of reminded me of The Music Man, except instead of band instruments, he's peddling Jesus. But it gave me a lot of, cheesy con man, just trying to sell the good people on something good.
Isn't she also the Partridge Family, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say Oklahoma. I hate Oklahoma, but not the state, the musical. I know she's in that too.
Fair enough. So that looks like a good spot for our first break. We'll be right back.
We're all getting fed up of endlessly scrolling for our next movie fix. So to get passionate about films again, join 3 movie mates on the Never Ending Watchlist movie podcast, where we take you on a movie journey as we seek to build the ultimate movie watchlist.
Seen all of those films are absolute bangers.
Yeah,
absolute bangers.
Bangers.
I applaud you again, sir.
We deep dive specific movies to find out facts, theories, and funny takes, and ultimately decide whether a movie is worthy of being on the watchlist.
I can't recommend this film.
Ouch.
We'll debate top 5s, rank directors' movies, and interview film fans just like you.
And she is an incredibly complex villain. She's fierce, she's immovable.
So whether you're a casual movie fan or hardened cinephile, we've got plenty for you to enjoy.
I got outvoted by the guy who chose the movie for this episode.
Join me, Damon Carter, Alex Hall, and Cam Young on the Never Ending Watchlist movie podcast every week on Podcast Everywhere.
It's easier to find Cameron on Facebook than it is to find a plot in existence. Right, anyway, for now, it's farewell to Alex.
Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 269th episode, we welcome back Clarissa Beckstead and Ralph Esparza to return to the waters off of Amityville as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of Jaws from 1975. Directed by Steven Spielberg, written by Peter Benchley and Carl Gottlieb. Cinematography by Bill Butler, music by John Williams, starring Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, and Richard Dreyfuss. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. All right, before we get too much further, let's check in with our guests. What are you guys working on, and where can people find you?
Oh, geez. Let's see. When this comes out, we'll be definitely off by the time this comes out. But we just finished and posted our Godfather 2 episode because I had never seen it. I know, don't kill me.
No, but yeah, you can't see something for the first time a second time. So it's good.
Yeah, true. But now, once June rolls around, we got some stuff lined up. We're going to do, let's see, we got Iron Claw.
Okay.
We got a Zoolander review coming up. That's going to be insane. We got some good stuff coming down the pipe.
Then we have also St. Elmo's.
Oh, God. Yeah, St. Elmo's Fire. That's going to be interesting. I haven't seen that in like 100 years. So. Oh, no. Dana, no. Dana, no. Don't do that to me.
Well, Dad also has to be covering that film coming up here before next year's Oscars.
All right.
That is his punishment film.
Nice, thanks.
There's
so
only
much.
2 films I've almost walked out on. That one and Moulin Rouge. Hated both of them.
Dana? I don't want to fight with another man about Moulin Rouge. I don't want to do it. I'm not doing it.
Dana and Baz Luhrmann do not get along.
I understand.
No one in Baz Luhrmann get along.
Yes.
Tom Hanks in a fat suit and Baz Luhrmann get along.
Yeah.
You should make him do that on this show and then have me come on and we'll just argue the whole time.
Okay.
He's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. You think that scares me?
I mean, theoretically, we have not set the schedule for 2027, and I think Moulin Rouge was 2002, so 25th anniversary.
Ugh.
We could do it.
Listen,
We could do it.
for Moulin Rouge, I'll do it.
It will just be 10s across the board for her.
No, that's not true. I
Might
can
be
be.
ones across the board for me.
Well, then we'll even out. It'll just be 5s. All 5s.
I think the lowest he's given a rewatchability ever is like 2, I want to say.
What would you give Moulin Rouge for rewatchability, dear? You have to live with me.
I plead the 5th.
Yeah, I bet you do.
As 2, well, let's say 1.5 lawyers, we would advise that is the correct move.
Jeez. That's all right. That's fine.
So anyway, but is there any particular place that people can find you?
Oh, of course, of course. We are wherever the pods are casted. You know, Apple, Spotify, all those good things. You can find us on Instagram at Shoot the Flick, Twitter at Shoot the Flick.
Yep.
Where are the other places, dear? We have a whole bunch of
TikTok,
stuff.
Blue Sky.
All at Shoot the Flick. So check us out. We usually have episodes every week, unless Scott accidentally deletes an episode by accident. By accident.
One time.
But thankfully, no one has to listen to me bitch about RoboCop for an hour.
At least this time around.
Yeah, I can understand that one too.
Ha! See? Dana gets me.
Yeah.
Forget all that stuff I said about Moulin Rouge. It's fine.
Okay. But as usual, all of our guest links will be available both in the show notes as well as on the website if you want to find them anywhere there. All right, let's get back into the heart of the episode. We left off at best performances. Dad, who did you have for best performance?
Burt Lancaster.
Wow.
Without question.
Given that you already said this is one of the top 10 best actor wins of all time, I'm so shocked.
Yes. You might have a heart attack with a shot of that surprise.
Thank you, Gilbert. Anyway, for what it's worth, I also have him as my best performance.
I do too.
Okay, so I'm the only dissenter. Okay,
Oh
fun.
no. Oh no.
I have Gene Simmons.
Who's
I
my best
think-
secondary performer, but go on.
Well-
Yeah, go on there.
Well-
Sure.
I think if you're gonna follow somebody and like they're gonna lead a cultish kind of place, you want somebody with a good forward face, and I think Gene Simmons does a really good job at that. And I don't know, I bought her as the face of this revival movement here. And it just for some reason because Burt Lancaster, sometimes as I sat there and watched him, I was a little turned off by him.
Some of the faces were a lot for you.
Yes.
And that's fair. But I think everything he does, even the weird shit when he's like all disheveled, like towards the beginning of the movie and just acting extra crazy, I think that that's all very purposefully done.
I think I gave Lancaster the best performance because he has so many individual scenes where I could pick out that I think he's doing something extra, or that it just involves a little bit more where it's a personality coming through. He has so many different con artist moments or shyster moments that to me come to the surface. No more highlighted or in particular than when they're in the newspaper office and he specifically turns or flips the argument around on Jeffords.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's why I would go with him as best performance. But I certainly would give Gene Simmons her flowers too, because I do think she's kind of the co-lead in this. She doesn't appear in just about every scene like Burt Lancaster does. But this is only the second movie of hers that I've ever seen. I watched Divorce American Style last year for the 1967 prep that I did for Revisionist Almanac, and I thought she was the best part of that movie. So I think she appears very wholesome, very earnest, and very vulnerable, which works really well for 95% of the film, because you believe when she says, I truly believe in the Lord and what I'm espousing. You buy that she's actually doing those things, and that's coming from a very earnest place, up until the point where she kind of gets high on her own supply. And
I was going to say that at that point, it kind of, the transition is a little more sharp from.
I actually thought it was rather subtle at the end there, where, like, I think it's the only way you can see this change in her is through other people's observations of the changes in her. It's not something that she's doing as like an actress to specifically put it out there. Like there's a certain tick or something where you notice the noticeable shift in her performance, so much as it is everybody else's reactions to her. And so that's why I would put her in secondary for me.
The only thing that I would say in rebuttal to that is, like, I do agree. Usually you, as the audience, you're seeing her through other people's perspectives. But, like, once we get to the end and we're going to talk, I'm sure, about the faith healer scene. And, like, yeah, she does get very high on her own supply. But at that ending point, that's the only time where, like, she really very outwardly is, like, you can tell, like, very strongly, like, how far down the rabbit hole she is.
Well, I think there is a change in her. I think once her and Burt Lancaster sleep together, I think we start seeing a change in her that, yes, it's kind of subtle to start, but I think they're like she dumps sand out of her shoe. Like there's like little things that you're like, oh, I kind of see the change here. It might be subtle, but I think she just does a good job. While I feel like Burt Lancaster, while giving a great performance, he's just kind of who Elmer Gantry is the entire movie. I don't really feel like there's a change as much with him. Like, I just feel like he's playing the con man. And, like, you don't know whether to trust him or if he's getting high on his own supply.
Well, I think there's a point. I don't think he's necessarily getting... Well, I think there's a certain point where he thinks, or he believes that he can actually be better, either because of Shara or because of all the love he's getting from the parishioners and all that. I think he lets himself believe, not necessarily that he's like this incredibly godly man or anything, but that he can be a better person, and that people can actually admire him, and that he can ascend to that, like, higher place in that way, not in a godly way. But then at the end, it all kind of falls apart.
I guess I would push back a little bit that in the way you're describing it, we have a different guest who's made some public statements as to who could be the protagonist if they're not ultimately, like, having a character arc where they don't change from the beginning to the end. And I don't know if I would go so far as to highlight that there's really no change in him, because at the beginning of the movie, while he's down on his luck and he does seem to be a poor salesman, he does highlight, at least at one point, that he knows all the salesman's tricks, and he uses those in this particular context and becomes successful. And to a degree, he becomes obsessed with being successful in this particular avenue, even to the point where he initially starts doing so for the love of Shara. But you see that as the movie progresses and she's willing to go on a picnic, go fishing with him, and take time off, he's obsessed with trying to make this revivalism be as big and momentous as possible. But by the end of the film, he's willing to give that all up. He could have become the voice of the revival and this larger motion, especially now that at least it's insinuated that Shara's dead.
Yeah.
He would be the only voice left. He willingly walks away because I think he does make a change from where he was even in the middle of the film to the end of the film.
Yeah, I think you can interpret it either as at the end when he like walks away. You can interpret it as, I'm just going to go back to being the con man because this is just who I am. Or you can take it like, I think either way, he definitely took something from this experience and at least wants to be a better person. Whether or not he can achieve that, I think is kind of left more ambiguous as he kind of walks off into the sunset. But yeah, I think regardless, like I said before, it's definitely the Burt Lancaster show. I don't think, as far as the lead performance and the best performance, I think it's hard to make an argument that isn't Burt Lancaster.
The love of the masses is intoxicating. And ultimately, when they pulled the plug on him and treated him like dirt and were willing to give up everything and destroy him and her by association, he became disillusioned with that intoxication of the masses. And he disappeared right before the final revival. And then he shows up and he really doesn't want to be there. He wants to run off with her. And so I think at that point in time, he's lost all hope or faith in the masses or the love of the masses and just wants to move on.
Other best secondary performances.
I got to throw Arthur Kennedy in there for sure as Jim Lefferts. I think he did a great job at sort of holding the line in this film and like being the voice of reason in a lot of ways. Even when Elmer Gantry kind of shits on him and screws him over, and he still is just like, yeah, that's just part of the game. And he kind of gets over it pretty quickly. And I saw him as the level head and I liked him a lot.
Two very iconic performances by newspaper men being the conscience of the film. Him in this one, and then Gene Kelly in Inherit the Wind.
That Gene Kelly?
Yes.
Huh. I guess I need to watch it.
Inherit the Wind's good.
Well, I've seen the play before. I think I've seen also the remade version with Jack Lemmon, I think it is.
Jack Lemmon and George C. Scott.
Yes. Okay.
Oh, yeah. I don't think I've seen that. I saw the one with Spencer Tracy.
So my joke answer for best supporting actor is Burt Lancaster's hair.
Oh my god.
Because it's insane.
there's one point where he turns around. It's like the first revival, I think, that he goes to, and he turns around and the whole back of his head is to camera, and it's like, sweetie, get a brush. Just get that out of there. That was bad.
But my real answer is Lulu Baines, Shirley Jones. Yeah, I think from when she shows up to the point where it's like my favorite scene when Elmer is getting like pelted with like rotten food and trumpeted at. Like, I feel like she goes on like a huge journey throughout that whole bit. And I think she does a really great job, like having like such a range of emotions for Elmer, hating him, loving him, feeling bad for him. And like, it's just the whole thing she goes through.
It's definitely a complicated relationship she has with him. Yeah.
To say the least. I mean, I was going to save it for remaining questions, but you get that hooked on the guy or that obsessed with him based on one fleeting night when you're a prostitute?
Okay. So
that's not
why. She's the deacon's daughter from the beginning. So they had a romance in the beginning before this movie, and they get caught by her father. And in the book, there's a whole thing with like a cousin that's involved. That's also weird.
And the deacon was like, "You have to marry her," and Elmer was like, "Okay, bye."
Yeah, basically, and like,
okay.
So she kind of gets dropped by Elmer and then disowned by her father and is forced basically into prostitution because she has nothing else.
Yeah, I took it more as like her connection to him is more like her sort of being resentful, but also missing that time in her life where she was a lot more innocent and a lot more well regarded and she had her family and all this stuff. So it's a complicated.
She loves him, but she also blames him for everything that's gone
Right.
wrong in her life.
Yeah.
I think that makes more sense when you have the full context from the book. But I was very lost as to what
they
she was
foreshadowed
doing.
that earlier in the film, where it talked about when the dean or Bill came and said, "Do you know anything about him?" And he was in seminary and he got caught having sex with the deacon or the dean's daughter. That's Lulu. So
Okay, but
he mentions her name on the train.
Yeah, he does say Lulu
what's
Baines
her,
on the train too.
Yeah.
yeah,
My God, my brain.
all right. Well, I just plain missed it, but
But I think it's easy to miss because it's kind of it's a quick little moment like here and there before she's introduced, and you're like, oh, Lulu, hello.
like I think this is one of the rare circumstances where I think you could remake the film because it's missing some of the context of the book, and the adaptation had to kind of water down some of the more controversial parts that I think might be ripe for further expansion upon in a modern film.
Yeah, I don't think we have to worry about watering anything down at this point
No.
in
No.
cinema. I think we're okay. So yeah, I think you could.
Yeah, this is rather tame, all things considered.
Well, yeah, especially with today's standards.
best secondary performance for me, I have Richard Brooks. I think his screenplay deserved an Oscar. I thought it was well done. It was tight. Other than the first few minutes, which basically set up who Elmer Gantry was, and so you knew what he was, I thought the thing flowed. It was a 2.5-hour movie, but I think it moved faster than a 2.5-hour movie. There was any part that I thought really drug, and I think that's in large part not only his direction, but I think it was his screenwriting. And he always considered, I guess, himself a screenwriter first. When you consider that this is his filmography, he wrote Key Largo, Beauregard and McCall, all right? But he also directed and wrote Blackboard Jungle with Glenn Ford. He did the screen adaptation of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof.
Love Cat on a Hot Tin Roof.
He directed In Cold Blood. And if you ever want to watch a bizarre film, I watched it in the late 70s, Looking for Mr. Goodbar with Diane Keaton. Okay? So he's almost, with this, if we were to do Blackboard Jungle, which is a classic film, and In Cold Blood, we would basically have him up for our 5.
You could take and do that with a lot of different people.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, just add 2 here. That's the
Yeah,
whole point of
okay.
having the 5 requirement for the Hall of Fame to begin with.
Okay.
Because there are not a lot of people that have gotten to 5, even though this is the 268th episode that we've covered.
Yeah.
So, most charismatic. I have Lancaster as well.
Yeah, I did too.
His smile is working overtime. in
Yeah.
this movie.
Yeah.
Oh, Jimmy boy.
It's like if you were today gonna do an impression of someone in the 20s, that's how you talk. Ah, Jim, my boy, how are you doing this fine day? It's like, okay, calm down.
For me, I had Gene Simmons. I don't remember her in too much. I mean, for whatever reason, but in this, I thought she was phenomenal. Absolutely gorgeous. Just wonderful.
Do you have anything of substance besides just superlatives?
She's pretty.
No, she filled the screen every time she was on.
So
She had-
more platitudes.
Okay. So remember the part where, this podcast may contain explicit language?
Here
Do
it comes.
Dana.
Yeah, okay. Fuck you. Anyway,
Always is tried and true.
so no, I liked her performance. I thought the part was not too big for her. I thought she made the part bigger.
Yeah.
And I think that's ultimately what charisma is.
Tom's face. He's like, still not giving me anything.
It's more than it had been.
Well, it's funny because I immediately picked her out when we saw the movie because I watched Guys and Dolls a lot.
Yeah, as did I. And she also plays a religious person in that too, which is kind of funny. But yeah, I like the scene where she's talking to the cops and kind of giving them what for.
Fire code. I can bring you to speakeasies all over the town.
And rips out the guy's cigar out of his mouth and rips it in half.
Yeah, she's very spunky.
We love a spunky woman in the 20s who gets what she wants.
She runs a business. I agree with Burt Lancaster. It's Burt Lancaster. He's
it seems like it's like a given just because of the character that he's playing.
It's the smile, it's the way he talks, But that's what you kind of need with a con man is you need them to be charismatic. And if your con man's not charismatic, whatever it is, the show, the movie, it's going to fall flat. But we've seen in hundreds of roles since then, the con man, the head of the mob or whatever, they have to be charismatic as that character. So
they have to have that award-winning smile so that they can look you in the eye, smile at you, shake your hand, and meanwhile, with their other hand, steal your wallet.
Right.
Or stab you in the back. Either way.
Well, you'd have to reach around quite far to stab in the back, but,
more gymnastics.
But anyway. All right, let's move to best scene then. I have 5 nominees here, and then you can nominate any additional ones that you would wish. I have On the Train. I have Gantry's first sermon. I have Corrupting Katie Jones. I have Blackmailing Gantry, and I have The Final Revival. I know for a 2.5-hour film that does a lot of cutting back and forth, and now thinking about it, the scene within the newspaper office, I think, is an omission by me. But outside of that, any other scenes you would like to nominate?
Yeah, so I want to nominate the scene where it has come out, where the news story has come out that he is a charlatan or whatever, and he starts getting pelted with the vegetables and the trumpet player, because just the way it's shot.
The trumpet player?
Oh, the trumpet player is crazy.
That was a great
scene.
Whip,
but the way it's shot and the lighting, and it's so well done. And again, this scene is mainly why I think Shirley Jones was such a great secondary performance. Is she comes in so smug, and then she sees all this happening, and it immediately is like, oh, this has gone way too far. And it's just so well shot.
I think because Lancaster plays that with such a disillusionment that it really works for me in essence. I agree that it is an impactful moment. Again, this movie is littered with impactful moments from about the point where you get on the train forward for me. But him just walking up the aisle and allowing them to pelt stuff at him, and him being the centerpiece of everything that's gone wrong, and kind of in essence paying for his sins in that moment, I thought was very well done, very effective. Affecting.
Either way, I think you're good.
Any other nominees?
You already nominated it. What am I supposed to say at this point in time?
What did I already nominate? The newspaper?
I called it Rebutting Laffer, the newspaper scene, because to me, and I'll say this right up front, that's my best scene and my favorite scene, because it so shows the manipulative powers of Gantry.
Yeah, I like because it gives both him and Lefferts a good chance to shine and basically show the two sides of the whole argument that's the theme of the movie, basically. The good of religion, and then what can happen when people corrupt it for their own means. So I think it's a pretty pivotal scene. Yeah, it was my favorite too.
Okay, so In the Newspaper Office is nominated for Best Scene by 2 of you. If there are no other nominees, Scott, I'll let you pick from I think it's 7 that we have here. On the Train, Gantry's First Sermon, In the Newspaper Office, Corrupting Katie Jones, Blackmailing Gantry, Rotten Tomatoes, and Final Revival.
I love the Rotten Tomatoes, but yeah, if you're gonna pick like the most impactful scene, it is rebuffing Leffers. It is that whole thing in the newspaper. It is probably the most important scene in the movie.
It's certainly the pivot point between the early portion and the back portion, because it leads right into the Corrupting Katie Jones portion where they finally get together and she shows him her final destination or final goal. But I'm going to go with Final Revival because everything's leading to that moment where he's defeated and he's slinking away, and yet she's taking on this additional power. And there's always something in the back of my mind whenever I've seen these kind of revivalist things, is especially if they're trying to perform miracles, quote unquote. Is this person a plant?
Okay, this is what I was going to save this for the questions at the end.
But there's, in the way that the cinematography is done, if you watch it, there's kind of a haziness when it's on one character, then it's people observing her, and yet there's like a clarity in the lens for as she's depicted. Mm-hmm. And yet when you flash on like Gantry, he's kind of got this like cloudy, hazy perspective to it. I thought that the way that they built into that, and then with the impending nature of the fire that you know is going to happen, and then everybody scurrying in and out, but her trying to, for whatever reason, trying to prevent people from leaving the fiery tent, and the imagery of them quite literally burning in this hell, I thought was actually very effective for me on a way to end the film. So just given the technical aspects, and because I want to be a little bit different, I'm going to go with Final Revival as my best scene.
Ultimately, that scene is Gantry is her lifeline to the real world, and she's separating herself, and he's being prevented from saving her.
Right.
And so she's off in this dream world that she's going to somehow survive through this. And it harked back to the old story about the guy on the, in the house and the flood, and God sent a boat, and then he sent a helicopter, and, why did you let me die? Well, I sent you a boat, I sent you a truck, and I sent you a helicopter. Why didn't you go? And that's what it kind of reminded me of.
Favorite scenes? We already got Dana's favorite scene. Mine's going to be On the Train. I like the pacing of that and kind of the almost French farce nature of it, where he's entertaining Lefferts, then he gets Bill to come out onto the platform so that they can interview, so that he gets his chance. But at the same time, he's ignoring Rachel, who's kind of been his entrance point. And there's just a lot of like a physical presence, almost a comedy nature to that scene that I think works really well for me.
Poor Rachel also. Jesus. My God.
I still want to know what she wanted to tell him.
Sweetie. Take a hint.
What exactly? They never get to it. What is it that she felt was so important? She constantly had to tell him, I need to tell you something.
Later, honey.
That I love you?
She's pregnant.
Good. Okay.
Well, that was one thought I had.
Jerry Springer. Jeez.
Oh, God. I guess my favorite scene is when they announced they're going to CNIF, because I like the little between him and Bill and the way they talk to each other, and it's just a fun bit.
I'm not your boy.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm trying to think of a secondary one behind the newspaper one.
Well, you don't have to pick another one if that's your favorite scene.
I really do like the newspaper one because I really liked Arthur Kennedy in this movie.
Okay, then let's finalize this with most indelible moment. For me, it's the final moments of the film. I think that ties things together really well. The final revival, the imagery of people quite literally burning in this hell, that you've kind of brought them to this hell on earth, which ironically is you're trying to theoretically escape the earthly bounds for a more heavenly goal. You're basically delaying earthly pleasure for a heavenly realm. That's the whole point of religion, or at least Christianity. And yet everything has been about your earthly self, your earthly pleasures, your own self-interest, and you've brought this hell upon yourself. So for me, that's the ending is what was most impactful.
I definitely would agree. However, I have to bring up something. So what I put for most indelible moment was the scene where they're under the pier and they're about to, do the thing. Like,
what's that thing?
You know the thing. You know the thing.
That thing you do.
That thing you do.
Dude,
okay. Between the score and him like slowly guiding her under the pier in full darkness and like whispering to her, and then the score like blaring like murder music, like, and then the guys up top are like, Sister Sharon, and then it goes like he's literally murdering her under the pier. That scared the shit out of me. I was like, what the fuck is that? So that stands out to me so much. I think the score in general stands out so much in this. Like, I forget the guy's name, I'm so sorry, but the guy that did the score for this did
Andre Previn.
Yes, he did a lot of musical scores, which I also found it made total sense to me after listening to it. And I'm like, because there are also times too, like when people are talking more in the beginning, I feel like, but there are times when people are having a conversation and like the music is going and you almost feel like they're about to break into a song. Like they're about to like sing about how they're feeling for each other. And it's like, okay, we don't need to go this hard, do we?
There is like one series of notes within the score that really turns me off. And it's the introduction of this like off-putting flat that's inserted into the middle of the blaringness. And then it's just overwrought with volume for some reason. Even in the opening, it's like very noticeable. And from that point on, I'm like, I can do without the score.
So my most indelible moment, I have to go with the Rotten Tomatoes scene again, because I think one of the biggest lines in this is they don't like their gods to be human. And I feel like this is like the point where that is like the biggest like showing of that line is he has been found as human and people have now rejected him. And it's just like, it's again, it's such a big scene, and the lighting really stood out to me here. The way they lit the scene was so well done, and it made it look so good that it was just, it's the thing I'm probably going to take away from this movie the most.
For me, it is the final scene. And again, I've already touched on it, which is she has now gone into this other sphere where she's kind of almost lost touch with reality. And he's the lifeline to try to bring her or keep her tethered to humanity. And he can't get to her and save her. That's the ultimate situation, and she perishes. And the fact that they don't even find her body, okay. I mean...
But her Bible survived.
Yeah, it takes a lot to completely cremate a body to that extent. So that's kind of... I don't want to say anything more than that because otherwise I'm going to be repeating what everybody else has said. I really think that that's the scene that basically you're led to understand what the purpose of the film was, which is to show that sometimes you create your own hell.
Didn't you say it went differently in the book, like worse?
Yeah. So in the book, it's not really a love story. Elmer Gantry forces his way out of the place, and he's the only one of the church that survives. Everyone else dies.
He doesn't even try to save her. He just like barrels through everybody and then leaves.
So it's like a Jim Jones Kool-Aid kind of thing.
Yeah.
But with fire.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that looks like a great spot for our second break. We'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley Rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our master greatest movies of all time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GMote podcast and find it as the top entry on the greatest movie of all time podcast show page. That is the grades we've done so far for all 236 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. All right, let's move to best funniest lines. I don't know if there are a ton of funny lines per se, maybe unintentionally funny, possible. But I do think there are at least a few lines, even though this is not a lines-heavy movie, despite being a lot of dialogue. I think it's more of a holistic approach from my point of view. But I'll lead off with the one that I led off the show. Love is the morning and the evening star.
Lulu Baines. Oh, he gave me special instructions back of the pulpit Christmas Eve. He got howling, repent, repent. And I got moaning, save me, save me. And the first thing I knew, he rammed the fear of God into me so fast I never heard my old man's footsteps.
That's a good one.
You're a $5 textbook. Me? I'm a 2-cent tabloid newspaper.
Are we going to make a touchdown for Jesus Christ? Huh?
Apparently we went to Notre Dame there.
Yeah, apparently.
Elmer Gantry. I have here in my pocket, and thank heaven you can't see them, lewd, dirty, obscene, and I'm ashamed to say this, French postcards. They were sold to me in front of your own innocent high school by a man with a black beard. A foreigner.
That killed me.
If nothing else symbolizes that this movie is still prescient, it's that line.
Yeah.
Can I take one more? You think I'm vulgar? Yes. Do you like me? Yes. Very much? Not very much.
Jill Lefferts. You look like a man who could use a drink. Elmer Gantry. You know something, Jim? There ought to be a law against drinking. Jim Lefferts. There is. Prohibition. Elmer. That's against selling, not against drinking. Amen.
I was accosted by 3 painted women.
Oh yeah, and the girl listening to it over the radio is like, tramps.
Elmer Gantry. Sin, sin, sin. You're all sinners. You're all doomed to perdition. Anybody have any others left?
George Babbitt. Besides, I'm for a free press, for free enterprise, and for whatever the hell the other freedoms are.
Okay, I have one last one. Elmer Gantry. I did run out on you back there in Kansas, didn't I? Lulu Baines. It's nobody's fault except maybe my old man's. Ever hear from him? Once, last Christmas, the letter said, Daughter, read 1 Kings, chapter 21, verse 23. I looked it up. It said, And the dogs in the street shall eat Jezebel. My old man and his Bible.
I have one last one. Elmer Gantry. Praying's the cheapest, first-rate medicine I know.
All right. With that, let's move to the Stanley Rubric. Legacy is up first, as it always is. This is a measure of the legacy of the film approximately 5 years after it came out, so 1965 to today, the last 60 years. What is the legacy of this film as shared between the audience and the industry, 5 and 5 points for each, for a total of 10 for this category. Dad, would you like to go first or second?
I will go first. Okay, this is with some trepidation that I have to say it this way. For the industry, I give it a 2. I think that Burt Lancaster is, at least among critics and people who are cinephiles, held in some regard, and this is his legacy. It's his Oscar. So I give it a 2. But for the public, it's a 1. No one knows this film. It's a shame. because having watched this film, I think it's really a good film. And it is, like you said, Tom, I think you could remake this film today and it would be really hugely popular.
I don't know if it'd be hugely popular, but I do think there are some pieces left out that are present in the book. I think if you did a combination where you took some of the context from the book and then maybe with the ending from this, because I don't know if I like the ending from the book that Scott described quite as much. This one leaves me at least a little bit more with, I'm not condemning Gantry by the end of it. He's not as much of a horrific character as him being the only one to escape the burning fires of hell there. But that being said, I have your scores exactly, so I will just say same.
I hate to be a copycat, but same. I had 2 for industry and 1 for public.
Yeah, and I just...
There was a fuzzy, sorry.
Sorry, threw me off. But I am also on the same boat with you guys. Exactly.
Hey, I just came up with an idea to who could play Elmer Gantry in the revised version. Kirk Cameron.
Oh my God.
How dare you? How dare you?
All right, for the sake
insane.
of it, because we all agreed and we needed something else to fill the space here, let's take a second to think of who would be a great preacher that has to be somewhat charismatic and a little bit more full-bodied. So I don't think you can take somebody scrawny like this. This isn't a Chalamet part for me.
No.
Like, this is Leo 2005 territory for me.
Yeah.
Sure.
Leo's too old at this point.
Well, naturally.
Unless it's for his girlfriends.
It's got to be somebody like late 20s, early 30s, I would say. So I think Austin Butler actually could do this really well.
Yeah, he'd be interesting.
Yeah, actually, yeah, you're not far off.
Part of me was thinking Chris Evans, but I think he's a little too old at this point.
Yeah, he's in his mid-40s.
Yeah, he's up there.
He looks a little bit younger, but he's been around quite a number of years. And even like Chris Hemsworth is probably graduated out of that. Glenn Powell actually wouldn't be too bad in this.
Glenn Powell would be fun.
He's got the smile.
Well, he's got that kind of con man-esque streak where he's already played the same kind of a role in Hitman.
Yeah, he can kind of
get away with this.
Play into it a little better.
But I also think you got to have somebody that's really willing to take and go out of their way to kind of do something like this. I still have yet to see The Master, but I hear The Master is very much kind of modern Elmer Gantry.
I know enough about like the plot that probably makes sense, yeah.
All right, so we have a 3 average between the 4 of us because we all agreed on the exact numbers. Kind of a rarity.
I was going to say, does that happen very often?
I don't know if it's ever happened between 4 people to agree on the exact same in a split category like that.
Yeah.
But interesting, to say the least. Impact and significance, though, this is a measure of the initial 5 years after the release of the film, so roughly 1960 to 1965. What is the impact and significance as felt between the audience and the industry as a whole? We add those together for a total of 10 points, 5 and 5 points each, to get the score for this category. Since you went first last time, Dad, I will go first here. I think because it got nominated fairly well, I think it was the second most nominated film in its particular year behind The Apartment. And while it doesn't end up getting some of the, or the prize, Best Picture, or Best Director for that matter, I still think Brooks basically getting what's in some ways the director's consolation prize, especially recent Oscars history, the writing prize. And you still get Lancaster getting Best Actor. You get Best Supporting Actress from this. It's not like it was a forgotten film. It was just kind of the second running film in that given year. I do think critics were very effusive at the time, so I'm going to give this a strong 4. However, on the audience side, I think it's a much more mixed bag. It did end up making its money back, but it wasn't by much. If you look at the overall numbers, 8 seems like it's high, but then it's against like a film list of maybe 15, 16 different films from that year that are listed as far as what their box office receipts were. So this
What
is
was
kind
the
of
number one that year?
Boy.
Oh God, I looked, but I didn't remember. I didn't even write
You
down
come
the
up
first
with
one.
this
I didn't know
one.
what it was.
I will genuflex in your presence.
Well, I was just going to look it up, but okay.
No, before you look it up, which was it? Give up?
I'll go with Spartacus.
No. The Swiss Family Robinson.
Okay.
I think it was that, and then Psycho, and then Spartacus.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing here at least. But that was on a domestic chart.
Yeah, that's. I'm just going on Google too, so I mean, I don't know.
But either way, I don't think it performed particularly well among the audience, but because it made back at least its budget and was at least somewhat profitable, I'm going to give this a 2 on that side. I have a 6.
I agree with you on the industry at a 4. I think the fact that it was the 8th film domestically is significant. That meant that people were coming out to see it. So I give it a little higher marks on the public. I'm at 3.5.
I have it as a 3 and a 3 on both accounts. I don't know. It just feels like it wasn't, even at number 8 for the year, it just doesn't feel like it was a movie that, I don't know, made enough of a dent either for the audience or the critics for that first 5 years to be like, I don't know, really impactful or significant to them. I guess that's kind of seemingly why it seems to have fallen to the wayside after that 5 years has kind of gone on.
So I gave it a 2 for public significance. As far as industry, I didn't go as high as 4. I went to a 3. Basically, for all the reasons you said, I don't disagree with anything anybody said. My only reason I didn't go as high as 4 with that part of it is just because it feels like this movie was it just got lost in the shuffle as far as the industry goes. It doesn't stand against some of the other greats that came out that year. It kind of just got drowned out. So I gave it a 3 for industry, 2 for public significance. So altogether, I got a 5.
All right. So that is a 6.13 average between the 4 of us. Let's move to novelty. This is a measure of the originality of anything having to do with the movie or how well it is executed. We give 5 and 5 points for this category in each of those 2 fronts for a total of 10. Would either of our guests care to try and start?
I'll give it a go. Why not? So novelty was probably one of the harder ones for me. Just because despite the fact that this is based on an existing book and yes, it did make a lot of changes to the material to fit a 1960 film audience. And obviously the subject matter for that time period was sticky. So I definitely gave it some flowers for that. Although, like I said, I held back on full originality just based on the fact that it's based on something else and just the subject matter of religion, even though at that time it was maybe not widely talked about. It's a subject matter that is obviously still very relevant and still talked about in a lot of media and film and all that good stuff. So for originality, I gave it a 3. For execution, I ended up giving it a 3.5. I think the acting is excellent. You know, all the technical aspects of the movie are pretty good. The score was a lot for me, but we already talked about that. Yeah, I think ultimately it's a very heavy movie. It's a very thought-provoking movie, and that's what it intended to get across. And I think it did a pretty good job at that. So I gave it a 3.5. So ultimately I got a 6.5 for novelty.
Okay. So that is our starting number. I will say for my part on this, on originality, it's something we've never really considered was it novel specifically at the time that it came out? I think for the most part, partially driven by my co-host, we usually judge these films somewhat against their predecessors, but also overall. And I'm not sure that's necessarily the right way to go. At the time that this came out, I think the title card does give it a little bit of extra credence that this was against type. It was a controversial movie. It was made to be a controversial movie of the time. I think if you remade this now, I don't think it's that out of place, because there have been other anti-religious films or films that are talking about the religious leaders as humans. Doubt comes to mind. We talked about The Master for a moment, although, again, I'm giving that as an example, even though I haven't seen it. So I don't think that this is completely out of place now, but in 1960, I give this a lot of points for where it was coming from in the moment that it was made. So I'm going to go with a 4.5 there. On an execution front, the score to me is probably a good half point down. I just found it to be grating and unnecessary, a little bit bombastic for my taste. I don't think the cinematography is bad, but it's kind of sometimes average for the time that it was made. I don't think it was anything special. It's not going to get points down necessarily for that, but it's also not going to get any additional points to make up for stuff. I think I agree that the acting is, for the most part, outstanding for a very limited cast, even though there are a lot of extras in this. The writing, for the most part, is really good. I think I would quibble a little bit with the Lulu plotline for me, because I was lost, and I know that you guys all picked up on it, but I was a little bit lost, and that could have been adapted a little bit better into the book, but I know that they were having some difficulty with trying to consolidate the book nature of what was going on with the Hays Code at the time, and that's one of the main areas where, if you made this in a modern context, I think that could have been fleshed out a little bit better. I think that we take too long with Gantry at the beginning, figuring out that he's just a terrible salesman for my taste to really get into this film. And it doesn't give me all that much on the character that I don't get by the time we need to get on the train. So there are a couple of slow moments from the editing and some choices that were made that probably could have pared this film back just slightly and been a little bit more successful for me. So I have a 3.5 on that end. I have an 8.
So for originality, I think it is a very original thing, especially for the time period of 1960, with going at religion and kind of questioning religion as a whole. But the thing about this that I feel like knocks it a little bit is the whole con man aspect of it, because we've seen that, I feel like, throughout time, of the con man who suddenly is maybe changing his tone or his tune. Like, hell, we talked about Guys and Dolls, like that's also like a thing, like in that with Marlon Brando and Gene Simmons, again with the con man who kind of falls for a religious woman. So it's kind of a thing. So I kind of knocked originality a little bit. The fact that it's based off a book also. So I gave it a 3 on originality. For effectiveness, again, I think it's acted really well by pretty much everybody involved. But I think it's a little slow in the beginning, as Tom said. But I also have kind of a problem with the end, and like just the message we kind of leave off at, where you're sitting there and you're like, are we supposed to like have him be, is he reformed, is he not? And then when you go into the deeper stuff about him, the book, and how he's not a good person, he goes on to a whole nother religion in the book. it felt really weird. Like we were trying to have our cake and eat it too at the end. And it turned me off a little bit. So I gave it a 2.5 for a total of 5.5.
For me, the novelty, the originality, I'm at a 4.5 because this took a concept that was 21 years old from the novel, reformatted it, came up with a new concept, made it more poignant for that time, and presented it in a package that fit within the time frame and in a way that was never really done in any other film that I could think of. Execution. I started out by saying I thought this film was way underrated and unappreciated. I understand the score was annoying. It was kind of like nails on a chalkboard throughout most of it. But once you stop paying attention to that and just started focusing on the acting, the script itself, the themes, I was going to go with a 4.5, but I think your points about I kind of disassociated myself from the score, but I will take a half point off and I'll go with a 4 for execution.
For a total of
8.5. I know that you need help with the math, so.
Not apparently as much as you.
I didn't need help with the math, but okay.
So that's a 7.13 average between the four of us. All right, let's move to classicness. This is usually a measure of how well or not something has aged. And that could be about anything involving the film, realistically. It could be, although we haven't encountered it yet, exactly how well somebody who's a major player in the film ages well or not off stage, as it will be. I know that will eventually come up here when we get to the usual suspects.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
This is kind of an amorphous category that usually requires a lot of nuance. We usually start at a 6 now as our benchmark because it's usually easier to take points off than to add them back in. And I will let my dad start as usual in this category.
We have a film that could be made today. It could easily be done and would be just as relevant and poignant today as it was in 1960, or for that matter, as the novel was released in 1939. We have nothing that's really morally or socially repugnant, per se, other than, but I think that, again, that's the dichotomy between premarital sex and the ramifications of it versus the morality of, just living your life or whatever. We have a strong female character as one of the leads who is going through her own period of self-reflection, growth, etc. Is she the ultimate strong female lead? No. So I'm going to give it a little bit off for that. But again, I don't find anything that really detracts from this film that would lead me to say this is not classic. And while I think the fact that this is so forgotten, unfortunately, I hate to detract from the classicness because of its forgottenness. It's not classic because it's so on point. People don't think of it, I think, sometimes as being a real critique of what things are going on in religion and society today. So I'm going to give it an 8.5.
Okay. So if we start out of the baseline of a 6, I think the only way you could really take points off for this is the detractors that would say that it's somehow anti-religious, anti-establishment, and whatever else. I don't necessarily take the message of the film being that so much as religion and its impact when it gets in the hands of humans. The divine by itself, I think can remain its own thing, but humans naturally fuck it up. And to me, whether you want to say it's the parishioners and how they receive the message, or the people who are trying to relay the message and how they do it, they're all fallible human beings with a lot of foibles and flaws that are quite apparent in this. And I don't think it pulls its punches on either one of those, to be quite honest. So from that standpoint, I don't take anything off for that. Where I will add points in, traditionally anything over 25 years, I start to kind of run a clock on timelessness. And since this is a 65-year-old film that I still think has relevancy and was somewhat ahead of its time, which I also add points usually in for, I'm going to give this an additional point for that and 2 points for timelessness. I'm going to go with a 9.
Okay. So, starting at a 6, I think this movie, as we said before, is very actually more relevant today than it has any right to be given its time period. As we talked about, it probably could be redone today and done very well and really be a scathing thing against a lot of bad people who are involved in religion and other aspects of life. But it's interesting because it has been lost to time. And I think they have tried to remake this before, and I think it kind of bombed out. I think it might have been a stage show or something when I was doing like background research or something, but it didn't do as well. And I don't know if I feel like you have to take into account that it just hasn't seemed to be one of those movies you go back to and people are like, hey, you know that movie? That's a movie you should see. Like, it's just not that, unfortunately. And I don't know the reason for that. I don't know why it's not that type of movie. Maybe it is because the Hays Code nerfed it a bit. And I don't know. I kind of feel like giving it a 7.5 just because it kind of it's faded into too much obscurity.
You stole my number. For me, I agree with a lot of the things you guys have said, and I don't want to repeat a bunch of stuff. I do think that obviously the overall message is a timeless thing, and we've talked about that a great deal, and we've talked about how it's underrated. But like Scott was saying, because it's lost to time, quote unquote, and nobody knows what the hell this movie is, I don't know, it felt weird to me to give it anything over an 8. And I know you said this category requires some nuance, but I will say I really didn't take off a lot specifically. The only thing that I really specifically took off for, and only like half a point really, but it's something that hasn't been mentioned yet. I felt like even though there are 2 really strong female characters in this, and I think that's great, especially in a movie from 1960. There's not always a lot of strong females in older movies that, you know, have any form of real authority or power. So I felt like that was necessary to call out. However, I did take half a point off because, like, at the end of the day, I feel like despite what Lulu and Shara both accomplish in the movie and what they pull off, I think there's something to be said for the fact that both of their characters, both of their plot lines in the movie revolve very heavily, if not completely, around a man. And that was the way of the game at that time, most of the time. And I get it. But I felt it necessary to cut off half a point for that. But because
it doesn't follow the Bechdel test.
No. And Rachel, don't even get me started on Rachel. But anyway. Yeah, I think the timelessness of the overall message definitely took it a long way. So I also gave it a 7.5.
All right, this is gonna feel.
I'm gonna do something I've never done before. I had a thought that crossed my mind while you were talking, and I'm going to increase my score for classicness from 8.5 to 9.5 because this film ultimately, it may be called Elmer Gantry, but I think that I think Shara and Lulu are actually the more prominent characters in this film, and they both are manipulating Elmer Gantry, even though he's trying to manipulate the situation for their own benefit from two different directions. So I think this is actually a more female-driven story than what I originally thought about.
You just had to fuck with the math.
Yep.
At least you filibustered long enough for me to be able to redo it, but it is an 8.38 average between the four of us.
All right.
All right, rewatchability on this one. Let's give it to our guests first. This is kind of a subjective test for the most part. I guess I'm the only one that's tried to be any bit objective on how rewatchable the film is recently. You can employ whatever test for subjective rewatchability you choose. You can come up with your own. You can choose from the vast arrays of different ones that have been introduced to this show, but we just need a number out of 10.
So, okay. I've now seen this movie 3 times. So I think that says something. I don't know what it says, but I never got bored. However, by the time I was at my 3rd watch, I could, well, even before that, but especially on the 3rd watch, I could definitely see points where you can very easily, you don't really need that cut. You can cut this, you can cut that. So I tried to look at it as, do I ever see myself just sitting at home, hanging out, and be like, you know what I want to watch? Elmer Gantry. I don't really see myself doing that. But I also, in looking at your notes, Tom, that you sent to kind of help us as first timers figure out our thing with the rubric, I said, how would you feel putting this on your own volition, and how would you feel if you were watching TV and it came on, and would you keep it on? And I think who watches TV anymore? But if I was watching TV in a hotel room and for some reason this was on the TV in the middle of it, I'd probably keep it on and watch it, because I think the performances are really engaging and really fun, and just the character study of it all is really fun, not just with Elmer but with Shara and even with Lulu, I think, and oh my god, Jim Lefferts, excuse me. So yeah, I ended up kind of sitting in the middle and giving it a 5.5, because while I can't see myself just like hanging out on a Saturday night being like, let's watch Elmer Gantry, I do like the movie, and I've seen it 3 times, so I mean, and I didn't turn it off, and if it were on in the middle, I'd probably keep it on. So
okay, so for me, I like that you brought up the thing is, if it was on TV and I caught it in the middle, would I keep watching it? I don't know if I would. I honestly don't. I feel like I watched it once and I kind of feel like that's good.
I think for you it would depend on which part.
Yeah, that's also probably true. I definitely don't think I would watch it to the end. But there's just parts of it where I'm just like, okay, it's fine. And then there's parts of it, like, I did not like the ending. The ending kind of drove me a little crazy. But in the same breath, understand it's got to be a little more light, because if this was a darker movie like the book,
we can't handle Elmer being basically a murderer.
Yeah, it would be a problem, and you probably would only get one watch and then be completely done. I'll give it a 5, but it's not a strong 5. It's like we're on the edge there, but there are parts of it that I think are really good and really well done. And if you're like, oh, this scene, I'll watch the next 10 minutes. Okay, that's cool, and then I'll leave.
Be true to yourself, Scott. You can't give it as low as I did for rewatchability when it came to Tombstone.
That's
true. Oh my god. That was wild.
Go ahead,
You want
Dan.
me to go ahead?
Yes.
He's going to blow us all out of the water.
I've come to the conclusion that part of rewatchability is where you are mentally at the moment in your life. Okay? This film struck me at a moment in time where I'm having very deep-seated questions about my own religious faith. And I think it struck a chord with me. If I would have watched this film 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it may not have struck the same chord. This is a film that I'm going to not only want to watch again, but I'm going to probably be encouraging other people to watch.
You might want to be selective. Like nobody from your Bible study group should probably watch this.
No, I think pretty much anybody from my Bible study group would enjoy this, because all we do is sit around and rip into certain aspects of the church.
I can definitely see Chris Jardine sitting down on a average Saturday and watching Elmer Gantry.
Well, okay. That in and of itself is not a reflection of the religious aspect, except what he likes or doesn't like. But the point that I'm making is that this is one I'm going to actively encourage people to watch who are starting to have doubts or questions about certain things, or how religion is done or portrayed, and how certain religious leaders can have multi-million-dollar mansions down in the Dallas, Houston area, etc.
Those are two very different areas in Texas.
Yes, there's two different groups that I'm thinking of.
I see. Okay.
Anyway.
Is a number in our future.
It is. Did you want it?
No, at this point, I'll just average it between our three
stars. I thought you froze, and I was like, oh, shit.
I'm at a 7.5.
Okay.
Because I really... this is a film that usually after I watch a film, wanting to see a film again within the next few months is not something I like to do. I actually would like to sit down and watch this film again and find somebody who might be interested in watching it also and talking about it. So 7.5.
I think you're going to have a hard sell on even getting Mom to sit down and really appreciate what you're getting out of this film.
Can I just say before we get Tom's number, I totally do understand what Dana is saying, because as someone who grew up Catholic as a kid and didn't connect with it at all, I thought that I was like on an island by myself. And then I watched Dogma, Kevin Smith's Dogma, and I was like, oh, I'm not weird. Okay, cool, got it. And then it clicked for me. So the fact that Elmer Gantry is to you what Dogma was to me is kind of funny.
Yeah.
All right. As for my attempt at objectivity on this movie, I think you're going to have a very hard sell on getting this movie introduced to anybody in the general population. First, Burt Lancaster is not a selling point for people in a modern context, unless you're over the age of 60. Like, let's just be fair. Gene Simmons and Shirley Jones are also two names that nobody knows. Richard Brooks is not somebody that, like, anybody is going, you know, I was going to finish the Billy Wilder filmography, but instead I'm going to finish the Richard Brooks filmography first. There's nobody doing that. So just on name recognition alone, you're going to have a problem. Second, this movie is at least 15 minutes too long. It's a 2.5-hour movie about a very dense subject. I think it could have been cleaned up, cut up a little bit better. There are some things where it's a little bit slow, kind of like 1960s slow, which works for the people who are constantly watching TCM. But for a modern crowd who's used to stuff being a lot quicker, you can't take your time like that unless you're going to be in a Martin Scorsese film. And frankly, I'm not sure why this isn't like a inspiration for Martin Scorsese, or he hasn't tried to redo this one instead of trying to do The Last Temptation of Christ for the third time or whatever.
I was just going to say, he's too busy doing the same movie every year.
Yeah, he's got like some new 70-minute Jesus film that he's doing. Whatever. Yeah. Anyway, that being said, I do think this would have an audience, but it's going to be in a very selective or limited capacity. It's going to be very limited to cinephiles who like older films specifically. And so you got to kind of strap yourself in for a 2.5 hour movie about religion. So I'm going to give this right down the middle. I'm going to say a 5. And so the average on this one is going to be a 5.75 between the four of us. For audience score on this one, we had an 81% for Google users and an 87% for Rotten Tomato users, giving us an 8.4. So to repeat the categories, for Legacy, we had a 3. For Impact and Significance, we had a 6.13. For Novelty, we had a 7.13. For Classicness, we had an 8.38. For Rewatchability, we had a 5.75. And audience score, an 8.4. Giving us a final total of 38.79, and currently placing it on our list at number 208 between Stalag 17 and The Diary of Anne Frank.
Oh my God.
Jesus.
What a first episode for us.
So nowhere near Empire.
We knew that coming in.
Close.
No, it's going to be right between that and The Dark Knight.
Empire is going to be very hard for people to top, and I say that fully knowing that Jaws could unseat it in a few weeks.
Oh my God, yeah, they're doing Jaws.
Jaws is going to be interesting.
That's going to be interesting, yeah.
You basically are going to have to start getting multiple 10s, and you probably can't have anything less than a 9 if you want to be the number one overall film.
I think we can do it.
It's possible, but
It's
I didn't think
possible.
there was going to be anything that was going to be over a 57, and we had a 57, what was it? 57.43, which is almost a full point ahead of The Dark Knight.
That wasn't too surprising. However, I was concerned that Andrew was going to strangle Dana through the computer screen, but I wasn't surprised at all.
Playing it up, he's doing a complete full acting job, much in the same way.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm a character on the Revisionist Almanac that's most classified with wrestling heel.
That's always a great category.
Yeah, so
That's what makes good content.
that it does. As always, if you have any commentary on our scores, not that I think most of the people listening to this maybe have even seen this film. So if you haven't seen this film and you're still listening to it, thank you.
You should see it. If you're interested, go see it.
I do not expect this film to do, or this episode to do, great numbers per se, just based on name recognition.
Mm-hmm.
But you never know. Maybe one of the very few Elmer Gantry pods out there. So
Actually, surprisingly, there's quite a few.
Oh, really?
Interesting. Okay. But if you have any commentary on our scores, think we screwed up or didn't screw up, I guess, you can write us at greatestaltimemmoviepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on any of our socials at GMOTepodcast, or you can find us on the website RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GMOTepodcast. Let's move to remaining questions. There is only one of my remaining questions that remains that I have not kind of already alluded to earlier in the episode, and that's, where does Gantry go from here? Assuming that it's not...
I think he runs for president.
You can't wait till I'm done.
No.
He was bursting with that one.
Continue.
You do not think like an editor. Anyway. Okay, fine. He runs for president. Any other remaining questions for anyone else?
I wanted to know what everybody thought about well, we kind of talked about it, but like, does anyone actually think that she was a real faith healer? Or like, if the fire didn't happen, were we going to see her in some back corner somewhere paying off that quote unquote deaf guy?
There is no other magical component to the entire movie. And so it'd be weird for this to all of a sudden present itself that she's a faith healer. I have a very difficult time with anyone trying to present or pass themselves off as the second coming of Christ. And to me, the only way it works is there's a plant. But
Yeah.
why do you feel it necessary to do so if your message by itself was not good enough? To me, this is like a Hail Mary pass.
It felt like it because it confused me because on one hand, if she genuinely believes that she is some disciple of God, and she's in such belief of it that she's willing to literally burn herself alive in the house of God because God's going to save her, so on and so forth, then why would you have a plant unless like Bill did it or
Yes,
You know what
that's
I mean?
exactly it.
okay.
Which is
That makes
Bill
that makes-
or I doubt if it was Gantry because he kind of became disillusioned at this point.
Yeah, he wasn't around.
I think that's the bigger point to me is that he was not around to engineer this whole thing, and he looked somewhat horrified in the back that she was going to this extent.
Yeah.
Well, my question is, how much of a con woman do you think she is compared to Gantry? Like, do we think, like, is she on his level? Is she actually, like, a good person? And she's just buying her own supply, as we would say? Or is she just as rotten?
I think through the course of the movie, you are meant to think that she is very earnest when the film starts out. But the further she gets down the road with Gantry, she can see what his influence and his overall authority and power is. And that becomes, or I guess not envious, but she covets that kind of power that he has.
Yeah.
And that becomes very attractive to the point where she does not want to give it up.
You ultimately, in those situations, want to have some level of ambiguity because that's what we all have to face. We don't know what's going on with certain people. We can assume, we can kind of imply, we can kind of see the deductive reasoning of where things are, but we never know. There's no certainty. Okay, so I think that was the whole point. We weren't supposed to have any certainty as to what she really did or didn't believe at the point of the end.
Yeah, I mean, even the ending, him walking off, is meant to be ambiguous, which gave Scott a little upset in his heart. He's like, "Oh, I want a clear-cut ending." But yeah, I get it. That's why I said I was like a little taken aback by her ascension. I feel like for a certain amount of time in the movie, her descent was subtle, and then once we got to the end, we're like, oh shit, she's really far gone, to the point where she's paying off people to make everyone believe she's a faith healer. It's like, I don't know. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Any other remaining questions? Hearing none, I would like to thank both of our guests for being on with us for their first time. I hope it wasn't too egregious.
No, it was fun.
Yeah, it was a good time.
Glad to hear that. You are both scheduled to be back on the show next May for A Knight's Tale, which I think I've disclosed, maybe not publicly, but I will here, is a guilty pleasure movie of mine where if I'm scrolling through like Amazon and it's on and it's like a random Saturday afternoon and I have nothing to do, it's going on.
I've probably watched A Knight's Tale at least 15 to 20 times.
Yeah, that sounds...
Yeah, when you were doing polls at some point, like you had done Knight's Tale as a poll, and you had done, I think Zoolander was in a poll, and I was like, oh my god, I have to do one of these, please. So you gave us Knight's Tale, and I was very grateful.
You are very welcome. However, Zoolander was highly sought after, so...
I'm sure, because it's Zoolander.
Yeah.
I have not seen it.
A Knight's Tale?
Ah,
Ooh.
I
We're
think
gonna
you've caught
fix
bits
this.
and pieces when I've had it on.
I don't remember, but okay.
Well, then again, you also didn't remember last week when quite clearly we'd done an episode of the show on a movie, and for whatever reason, you thought you'd never seen it.
The movie that I remembered seeing, I had a different title to than what you had mentioned. So yes, I understand.
Lots of great music in Knight's Tale.
So wait, Tom, do you think he's going to like it?
I have no idea, but he likes sports films, and it's basically a medieval sports film. Yeah. So, yeah, probably.
All right, good.
Also has one of the greatest speeches.
We're going to get there, Scott.
I missed my introduction.
Ah, yes. My lords and my ladies. Yeah, Paul Bettany's great in that movie. Mr. Jennifer Connelly. Regardless. All right. Just a reminder for everyone out there. What are you guys working on, and where can people find you?
So we are Shoot the Flick. We have new episodes pretty much every Wednesday, where Scotty and I, us hubby and wifey, introduce each other to new movies. We just had our Godfather 2 episode come out because I had never seen it. As an Italian woman, I was being ostracized from my family, so it's about time I got that done. And then coming up in the summer, we got some new movies coming out, new movie reviews, new special guests. Please go back and listen to our Tombstone episode featuring Tom and Dana. That was really fun, too. Poor Scott demoralized, but that's okay. We love that. It's fun. But yeah, at Shoot the Flick everywhere on the social medias. Thanks for having us on. It was really fun.
Thank you.
Hopefully you won't have the Fredo effect.
Broke my heart, Fredo.
Fredo!
So, because we are pre-recording this episode almost a month in advance, we will forego remaining thoughts on this one. So that's going to do it for us this week. Thank you for listening. So, 1,100 men went into the water. 316 men come out, and the sharks took the rest. June the 29th, 1945. Next week, for our 269th episode, we welcome back Clarissa Beckstead and Ralph Esparza to re-return to the waters off of Amityville as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of Jaws from 1975. Directed by Steven Spielberg, written by Peter Benchley and Carl Gottlieb. Cinematography by Bill Butler, music by John Williams, starring Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, and Richard Dreyfuss. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in on our fun. You can also email the show at RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GModePodcast or at greatestaltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com, or find us on any of our socials on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky, or TikTok at the handle @GModePodcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our distributor is Captivate FM, and our technical provider is Riverside FM.